Up next, the interview we've wanted to do since the fall of 1997, Shawn Michaels one-on-one. Let me make you some guarantees. He won't be wearing that. He will definitively answer questions about the Survivor Series. There'll be nothing left to ask after that. He will face the music from Bret Hart, and Shawn Michaels will make a stunning announcement at the end of the show. So much to talk about, so bring it on.
Off the Record with Michael Lansford is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
We have had the pleasure over the years on Off the Record of interviewing all the biggest names in the wrestling industry, from Vince to Hogan to Flair to Mick to Bret. The list goes on, but there is one name that has been missing in our list, and he is here today. Shawn Michaels, thanks for joining us on Off the Record.
Thank you very much, and thanks for putting me in that class with big names, even though I'm probably down at the bottom there.
Well, I think right away people are shocked by the humility, and that will be the subject of much of what we talk about. For 5 years, guys have talked about you, said everything from brilliant performer to pain in the ass. I want to cover all of that on today's show, but let's start with your return. 1998, you left wrestling for back surgery, and you were told by your doctors afterwards, do not wrestle again. Now you are back, you are taking big bumps. Why?
That's $1 million question. Why? For what it's worth, they're still telling me not to wrestle. And I was never really good at listening to those guys anyway, I don't think. But to be serious, it was, when I came back, I had no intention of wrestling. I was just coming back to play a small role, supportive role on TV. And on Raw, my buddy Kevin Nash went out and wrestled, blew his quad out and went down. And the next day I was on the plane, and for the first time since I'd been back, I hadn't been back that long, but nothing creative had really been coming to me. And all these ideas started coming into my head. And at a point in my life now when those type of things happen, I try not to react. I try not to make decisions based on emotion anymore in my life. And so I sat there and I thought about it, I prayed about it, I meditated about it. And all of a sudden, these creative ideas started involving me in a wrestling situation. And to be perfectly honest, what I did was sit there and say, Lord, do you really, are you calling me to get back in the ring or anything there? And you're not supposed, and again, this is not for anybody out, this is not how you're supposed to make decisions in your life. But
So let me ask you this: when you were hearing this and you were getting this message, let's roll the tape. Is this what you were hearing as a viable suggestion for a guy? Take a look right there over your left shoulder. For a guy with a bad back, I mean, I cannot believe that anyone was advising you, hey, you know what? Go out and do that.
That's what I'm saying. Don't let me put the heat on the Lord. It wasn't his fault. Believe me. That's all human error. But no, I was just. I guess long story short, I was led to Joshua 1:1, and it says, be strong and courageous, for I am with you. And I just thought, I just thought I wasn't going to put I was going to want to put my faith in action, and I don't know, it felt, I don't want to get too deep about it, but it just really felt moved to do it.
I think we got to clarify this for people because you have not done a lot of these interviews, and I think in Canada this is probably the first, and people are hearing you making reference to the Lord and Christianity and getting direction, and you're talking about the Bible. You are a born-again Christian, right?
Yes.
As of April the 24th of last year.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. And it is something that has completely taken over my life in the most positive of ways, and so I don't make any decisions that I don't think will glorify the Lord. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, but none of this makes sense because you were the Heartbreak Kid. You were a guy with a persona. You were the ultimate prima donna. In the ring, outside the ring, in the locker room, and everywhere. When you look back at Shawn Michaels, Heartbreak Kid, the guy that you were, what do you think?
Immature, I think, is one word. There are a lot more abrasive words.
Use them.
But I would, but I refrain from using them. But no, I mean, I was a pain, as you said, but for what it's worth, it always came from just my passion for the business, and I just wasn't good at controlling it. I wasn't good at channeling it. I just went, but it all came from just a desire to be, I say desire, it was probably at that time, to be honest, probably more obsession than desire. And again, it's not healthy, and it didn't manifest itself in healthy ways.
If you and I were having this interview a year ago, before April the 24th, when you found the Lord, it'd be very different, right?
Very much.
You see yourself very differently now. I think you see yourself a lot more clearly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. The Lord did that for you, right?
Yeah. No.
You see yourself very differently now than you would have before.
Yeah, well, I do, and I do think it, and it isn't me. It's nothing that I have done, with the exception of of saying Jesus, take over my life, because I've made a mess of it. So can you take?
What are
it
you
from
ashamed
here?
of that you did? And I didn't plan on asking that question, but as you look back, I'm thinking that there's stuff in your mind that you don't like about you.
I like everything about me now.
No, but I'm talking about back then.
But I mean, I just, for whatever reason, I didn't, and I don't know if I didn't like myself. I couldn't find any happiness in anything I was doing. I mean, I wanted to be successful in the wrestling business, and when I was still just as miserable as can be. And you always hear about people who've been led to the Lord, who they're always searching for something. I guess obviously I had to be one of those people. That is what. I don't know, I was looking for fulfillment.
Because you made it to the top, right? There's no question that you were at the very top of your game. A lot of people say you were one of, if not the greatest wrestlers of all times. You were a brilliant performer in the ring. You were a brilliant performer with the microphone. You were everything that a wrestling promoter could want. But to make it to the top, some guys climb over people and step on people. Did you step on people on the way?
No, I stepped on them, I think, after I got there. I never, I was always...
Who'd you step on? When you were there?
Once I got there?
Yeah, when you were at the top.
Well, I don't know, I can't say that I stepped on him, but I can't say that I brought a lot of dignity to the position I was in. I could have handled it a lot better. I wasn't as professional as I should have been. I was still very immature. I said stupid things. I did stupid things. Made bad decisions. But before, I was on top. I mean, I just went out there and tried to have the best matches I could. Part of it is, you're not a threat to anybody. I was probably saying some of the same things I said once I got on top. It's just nobody pays attention when you're support on the card. And then once you get on top, everybody's listening.
I gather there's nothing I can't ask you that you don't want to answer, right? Pretty much. Can I ask you about Bret Hart?
Sure, yeah.
He was on this show and he made some comments about you. Plus, I really want to know, as do all Canadian wrestling fans, about '97 Survivor Series. Will you tell us?
Yes.
We'll do that next on OTR.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
We've done maybe 1,200 of these shows, one-on-one interviews, probably 50 or 60. Almost always feel like I know what to expect. This time, I had absolutely no idea. This is a total shock. Shawn.Michaels, it's been a pleasure so far. We got so much more to talk about. How important is it to you to be seen differently by people now than the way they saw you, say, 4 or 5 years ago?
Oh, I don't know that it's, I mean, with all due respect to people and everything else, it's not... I mean, I can't concern myself with trying to change the minds of millions of people around the world. I hold myself accountable to one person, and that's it. And that's,
You're not talking about Vince now, right?
Nope.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, because a few years ago, that would have meant something very different.
No, sure, certainly. But no, and, I read something in a book, and you and I were talking about it earlier. I read something that said, don't preach me a sermon, show me one. All I can do is live my life doing the best I can to be accountable to the Word of God. That's what I do. And if I fall short, He'll let me know, and I'm sure 1,000 other people will too. But I can't worry about trying to change the minds of a lot of people.
Right, and I got to play you this clip from Bret Hart. He was on our show a while back, and I said to him on the air, I said, we're going to play the clip for Shawn.Michaels. So I asked him what he thought of Shawn.Michaels right now. Take a look, and then I want your comment.
I'd say he was a two-faced, lying chicken shit. And I'm probably being nice to him.
And now?
No, I don't think that's a snake that never changes stripes. Shawn, He was the kind of guy that would make friends with you or bury the hatchet with you 10 minutes later, and 10 minutes later he'd be out there stabbing you in the back again. You couldn't make peace with him.
Now, clearly, Brett does not know you now. You haven't had contact with Brett for a long time, right?
Right.
So he's talking about how you were. Is that a fair comment? Talking about how you were when he knew you, when you wrestled together.
No, I don't even think that's fair to even how I was then. It would be a little tough to say I was the kind of guy that, I mean, we obviously never buried the hatchet with one another, and each time we tried, one of us. You know, the thing is, I think the difference between Brett and I is that I'm willing to take responsibility for my part of it, and have asked for, you know, I've said that I was sorry and have asked for forgiveness and have forgiven my part of it. I've taken responsibility for my part of it. But that's always a two-way street, and I can't control. Brett certainly has a right to his opinion, but I can't, you know, I can't make up Bret Hart's mind for him. And as I say, he is entitled to his opinion. But no, I mean, it's. I don't even think that's a fair comment even back then. I might have been a little difficult, but I would say that's even a little snug for describing me back then.
I would like to at least attempt to put this to rest. 1997 Survivor Series, the most famous wrestling match, one of the most in history. It was the departure of Bret Hart. You talked about this a little bit on Confidential, a WWE show, and wrestling fans across this country have put it to me to put it to you and ask, what happened on that night in Montreal? How much did you know about Vince McMahon's plan?
I knew everything. I knew everything. I was told by Vince that this is what they had planned, and I was told not to say anything. You know, it was his decision not to say anything, and even after the fact, to deny it. So that's what I did. Years later, they came down to do the show and the Confidential show, and I mentioned to the girl, I said, you know, a lot has changed for me in the last several months at the time that they did the interview. And I said, you know, I said, I don't do an interview anywhere without being asked about what happened in Montreal. I said, I can't, you know, I need to tell the truth. And this girl hadn't been with the company that long. So she said, well, okay, I don't know what the situation is. So I made a call to Vince to try to tell him that I was going to, you know, wanted to tell the truth. Couldn't get a hold of him, so I said, well, I'm going to tell the truth, and you guys can choose to play it or not. And I said on the show that I knew, and I did. And there's, that's it. I knew that it was going to happen.
Let me ask you this. The person that you are now and the way your values have changed and the way your life has changed, if you were presented with that same scenario exactly, Bret Hart in Montreal, great champion, and Vince wanting to change things underneath his nose, would you have gone along with it?
You know, I don't know. But, you know, what I think about is this. I would probably still have done it. Very simple. And people say, oh, you know, the Bible says this, and that is you submit to authority. Your authority above you, that is your boss. You do your job if he asks you to do it. And that's what I did then. My boss asked me to do a job, and I went out there and did it. It's unfortunate that I don't know if you know the Teflon Don.
Of course. And
Sammy the Bull Gravano. The Don always made the rules, but it was Sammy Gravano who had to go out and pull the trigger. And I was the guy that got to go out and pull the trigger. And you know, I'm not proud of it, but at the same time, I don't let it define my career. And I don't think anybody does. It was one incident in my career of over 18 years, and it happened. But there's still one guy, the same guy, that had 100% control over that to make that outcome different, and he chose not to, and that's Bret Hart. He simply could have done what all of us are supposed to do, and that's do what our boss tells us to do.
When you look back at your career, because I've heard this from guys who wrestled with you, that you weren't the best over the course of your career of doing what the boss was telling you to do when it meant humbling yourself in the ring.
I was not.
You were not the best.
Was not the best?
Yeah.
No, that's not true. I fought him tooth and nail on everything, But ultimately, I always said, if you tell me you want it done, I'll do it.
But you would rather have turned in the title than lose it in the ring, right?
No, that's one of those things that you've never heard Vince McMahon say that.
Nope.
You'll hear the guys. Again, like I know you're referring to Bret saying, well, Shawn didn't want to do this. The only person that has ever said that is Bret Hart. You get Vince McMahon on here and you say, did you ever tell Shawn to do a job for Bret Hart? He asked, do I want to work with him? And I said, no. I said, the guy has not been supportive of me since I've been champion.
Shawn.Michaels, I got to ask you about a guy who has supported you, Triple H. We'll do that next on OTR. You get your surprises in this business. An amazing show with Shawn.Michaels. You were part of a group called The Click, right? You guys still all friends? Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Triple H?
Yes, yeah. I mean, obviously we're not all in the same company or anything anymore, but no, we still talk. Obviously, I mean, I see Hunter every Monday, talk with him a little bit. Kevin and I talk. I don't get to talk to Scott as much. But yeah, we all keep in touch.
Is it hard to have really good friends? Not people that you hang out with and have a drink with, but really close friends in a world that sometimes you got to climb over or you've got to move in spite of somebody. I got to imagine wrestling's really tough like that.
I've always heard it is. And when you do establish those friendships and you stick together, you get branded with a name, and then you all of a sudden get called out to be this huge influencer or whatever in wrestling. I mean, it's a very, again, it's a very amusing line of work when you think about it. We were all friends that just hung out, drove up and down the road together, used to talk about wrestling ideas, and then we'd come and tell Vince what we talked about in the car. And boy, before you knew it, we were the most powerful group in wrestling.
You were all about wrestling, right? Like at one point, wrestling was defined you. You were a wrestler. That's what you did 24 hours a day.
That's it, yes.
You look at a guy like Triple H, who you're close with and have been close with over the years. He is living it right now because he's involved in so many aspects of him. What advice would you give to Triple H?
It's hard for me to give any advice. I did the same thing. All I ever say is, when you do get married and you have a family, put your focus on that. I mean, that's all I can really say. And I really try to keep from.
Of course, if he gets married, he's still going to be in wrestling, right?
Yes, yeah. And again, I can't. It's hard for me to offer advice into a situation that I haven't been in. So, again, as I said, I try to keep from sitting there. It used to drive me crazy when the old timers used to
give you advice.
Not give me advice, but every time is this blue? And then you get this 2.5 hour dissertation about how the color blue came about, and I just want to know, is it blue?
What's the most events that you wrestled in a year?
289.
Would you do that now? Because you have a young child and you say your values have changed.
No, I wouldn't do 89.
So you could never have if you would have been Shawn.Michaels 20 years ago, the way you are right now, or 15 years ago, say, you would never have made it to the top, right? Because you would never have committed yourself 100% to this thing called wrestling.
Well, I don't know. I guess it would be, I was pretty darn selfish 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Now, had I had the same, had the same woman come into my life and the same child come into my life, I probably would have been able to think past myself, but I didn't have the ability to do that. Again, to me, it's Jesus Christ that did it, and again, Rebecca and my son played a huge role in that.
On that note, we go to break. We're here with Shawn.Michaels, this very revealing and very surprising show. Let us know your thoughts on everything that takes place regarding our show. This is for you. Hey, Shawn, next to Foley, no one has ever sacrificed his body for his craft quite like you. And it's pretty hard to debate that. You have poured it all into that. And you got a lot of people who agree with that. We'll talk more in a moment. We're wrapping it up with Shawn.Michaels, not the interview that I think anyone in Canada thought that we would be getting. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for pouring your heart out.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Let me say that you've been involved in how many WrestleManias? Because we're looking ahead to WrestleMania 19.
Started at 4, I think, or 5.
Right, and you've had many great matches. The Hour with Brett, is that number 1?
That, if it's not number 1, it's 1.5 for sure, yeah.
I just can't help but think of you and Brett and think that you guys missed out on something unbelievably special.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, I think we capitalized on, I don't know if it gets much better than the Hour, but no, I loved wrestling him. I really did. I could, you could go out there and have a wrestling match with him. It was a sheer joy to be.
You used to watch him backstage and say, that guy is unbelievable, didn't you?
I used to say that I think he's, I mean, I would like to get out there with him. And heck, he used to come back and say, I see you being the guys. Eventually, somebody that's going to take my place.
I feel a reunion show happening right here on Off the Record. It's the feel-good story of all time.
I mean, I would do it, but until brother gets forgiveness in his heart, there's
Hold on. So you're saying you'd come on the show with Brett?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's the challenge for Brett right now. Let's see if he'll do that. Let me throw out some names.
I'll sit there and say, Brett, forgive me, and let's move on. I mean,
I'm wearing a helmet for that one.
And you know what? For what it's worth, unforgiveness doesn't make me suffer. It only makes him. He doesn't. He still looks angry, and that isn't healthy.
Let me throw out some names at you. Give me a 1 or 2 line answer. Ric Flair.
The greatest. Woo! Oh, yeah, I think I'm his biggest fan.
You wrestled him for 5 minutes in '92. That was it. Would you want to wrestle him again?
Yeah, I would. I would have loved to have, when both of us were at our prime, which obviously couldn't happen. But yeah, no, I would. And he and I talk about it all the time. I'd love to get in the ring.
Marty Jannetty.
My buddy, miss him. We've been playing phone tag for several months, just trying to get in touch with him, see how he's doing.
Vader.
Leon, a big cuddly bear. He's actually a pretty nifty guy.
Sid Vicious.
Sid, I had good matches with Sid. Everybody found Sid difficult, but he and I worked well together, I thought.
Well, you know what? Last name, Curt Hennig.
Curt, I was just at his wake. Tragedy, a gifted guy, so much fun. But a huge loss to
Shawn, I got to cut you off, but thanks so much for doing Off the Record. Shawn, up next, the interview we've wanted to do since the fall of 1997, Shawn.Michaels one-on-one. Let me make you some guarantees. He won't be wearing that. He will definitively answer questions about the Survivor Series. There'll be nothing left to ask after that. He will face the music from Bret Hart, and Shawn.Michaels will make a stunning announcement at the end of the show. So much to talk about, so bring it on.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you.
My buddy Kevin Nash went out and wrestled, blew his quad out and went down. And the next day I was on the plane, and for the first time since I'd been back, I hadn't been back that long, but nothing creative had really been coming to me. And all these ideas started coming into my head. And at a point in my life now when those type of things happen, I try not to react. I try not to make decisions based on emotion anymore in my life. And so I sat there and I thought about it, I prayed about it, I meditated about it, and all of a sudden, these creative ideas started involving me in a wrestling situation.
I'm going to cover all of that on today's show, but let's start with your return. 1998, you left wrestling for back surgery, and you were told by your doctors afterwards, do not wrestle again. Now you are back, you are taking big bumps. Why?
That's $1 million question. Why? For what it's worth, they're still telling me not to wrestle, and I was never really good at listening to those guys anyway, I don't think. But to be serious, it was when I came back, I had no intention of wrestling. I was just coming back to play a small role, supportive role on TV, and on Raw. And to be perfectly honest, what I did was sit there and say, Lord, do you really? Are you calling me to get back in the ring or anything there? And you're not supposed. And again, this is not for anybody out. This is not how you're supposed to make decisions in your life. But
So let me ask you this: when you were hearing this and you were getting this message, let's roll the tape. Is this what you were hearing as a viable suggestion for a guy? Take a look right there over your left shoulder. For a guy with a bad back, I mean, I cannot believe that anyone was advising you. Hey, you know what? Go out and do that.
That's what I'm saying. Don't let me put the heat on the Lord. It wasn't his fault. Believe me.
By the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
We have had the pleasure over the years on Off the Record of interviewing all the biggest names in the wrestling industry, from Vince to Hogan to Flair to Mick to Brett. The list goes on, but there is one name that has been missing in our list, and he is here today. Shawn.Michaels, thanks for joining us on Off the Record.
Thank you very much, and thanks for putting me in that class with big names, even though I'm probably down at the bottom there.
Well, I think right away people are shocked by the humility, and that will be the subject of much of what we talk about. For 5 years, guys have talked about you, said everything from brilliant performer to pain in the ass. I want